I'm David Boje.
I'm Duncan Pelly.
I'm Dr. Jillian Sailors.
My name is Sabina Trofimo.
And I'm Ronnie Sailors, and this is the Enthinkment Circle.
So it's
in a good way, yeah.
Yeah, so he plays it like chess. He said, well, it's a complex adaptive colony, so we're going to make a move on it, but it's going to make a counter move, and it's going to start producing its alternative to testosterone. But we know it's going to do that. So we're going to go in there and we're going to keep that thing low. And we got the second generation androgen deprivation therapy, whatever it is, I picked up the med today. You can't even get it at a pharmacy because it's not federally approved. You got to pick it up at MD Anderson at their pharmacy physically and take it with you home. Then you take 4 pills a day. And I'll be taking those for, 3 to 6 months, something like that. No, it's 9 months, 9 months. No, 9 to 12 months, something like that. Then I do a whole battery of tests again in July. And they do a bunch of, I think I stay for radiation. I don't know. It's so complicated. Who can follow this?
So can you avoid chemo then, or are the pills?
No, I don't think they're not mentioning anything on chemo. They're just, it's like for years they've been going after the spread. They've been obsessed about, how it's metastasized and spread. And he said that's a lame strategy because when a few of these cancer cells break away and form a new colony, they haven't set up their environment. They got to set up their whole environment, and that takes a long time. She said, so we're going after the main colony and get that thing dealt with strategies and counter strategies. So I'm learning more about complex adaptive systems than I ever knew I would learn, Anyway, enough about that stuff. So, but he keeps using the word cure, which is unusual for a doctor.
Yeah.
The head of the whole medical oncology for MD Anderson. And he said today, well, if some of this stuff you get a reaction to or whatever, we're not going to run you methodically on the protocol. We're just going to deal with that right then and there. To hell with the protocol, we take care of you. He said, number one thing is to deal with different kinds of side effects so that there's some side effects of treatments, and then there's some side effects that resolve themselves when you're done, but there's some side effects that may last, and that could affect your quality of life. So we want no side effects that affect your quality of life when you're done, So I'm saying, good goal. Okay, I accept. But it is so weird that a lot of local doctors are prescribing stuff that's 10, 15 years old in terms of strategy, or stuff that's not workable anymore. You know what I mean? So lucky me.
But I guess I don't know any better, right? Is that?
No, they're like it. I read a lot of these books because they got good libraries here at the MD Anderson, and checked out a bunch of books. And you can tell if a person was brought up as a surgeon and they want to remove things, they're going to say, oh, you don't need a prostate. You don't need a prostate. You can wear those little panties the rest of your life, What do you need a prostate for? I'm going like, yeah, I think you got some bias going on in your thinking, and then you take the radiation, they want to radiate everything. But to use combination strategies is kind of a new thing. So, yeah. And they got special CT machines, CT scanners that they have a chemical that you take and it lights up where the cancers are in your body. Just illuminates them. So they get these tremendous images now. And anyway. Enough of that stuff. So I'm meditating, and every morning Grace Ann and I do the Qigong YouTube. Really good, 17 minutes morning warm up with Miranda. And it's really good doing the flow, get the energy and chi working. And I had 4 acupuncture sessions while I was here this time. 4 different ones. One yesterday. I said, I'm not going to go through all that stuff and leave here and my body's all like trying to work out its chi. So I got that acupuncture yesterday. But I was in the office today and he said, well, we're going to do one more test on you. We're going to take one more vial of blood and do genetic testing so they can determine which part is genetic from my family tree and which part is Agent Orange. I said, there's no test for Agent Orange. He said, well, yes, there is. There's a way we can parcel out, if the particular genetic makeup of prostate cancer is these particular kinds of, I think they're enzymes or something like that. And then genetic markers or something. So there's some deep stuff. Deep stuff.
It is stunning that they can do that, that they can actually
do that. They can do that. And
wow.
We had a little argument over Monsanto. But I say Monsanto's not all bad. I'm going like, okay, but I'm an organizational scholar and they're a complex adaptive system that's got no ethics. And you say, well, yeah, you're right about that. I won. So how are you all doing? You having a good time?
Mm-hmm.
Pretty good.
Yeah, doing great.
Yeah. So doing pretty good.
Paul asked about you the other day.
Yeah, well, I still got to get Paul's number again so I can call him. If you want to shoot me in an email or text, I'm pretty good at texting now.
Oh.
Yeah. So what I wanted to talk about, I don't know if you want to talk about anything, whatever, is I went through on page like 200 to 220 of the what's called Thinking book.
Mm-hmm.
And the guy has switched gears in a really fundamental way. And Heidegger, and he's talking about how in the ancient Greeks and it really fits this whole enactment and Enthinkment kind of stuff, because he said that the Greeks had this notion of taking something to heart. And it's taking - heart. And it was a spontaneous act, and it sort of fits the notion of enactment, in that it was not about thinking, it was about what's perceived. And I kind of like their approach that he's taken. Now, he said that that his reading of ancient Greek pre-Socratic is that there would be a telling. So there'd be a telling. So we got, and a telling that had to do with memory and all that, what we call prospective, et cetera. But he said there was also this notion of laying something before you, laying it before you. So you kind of what Heidegger would call elsewhere had an encounter with it, and you engaged with it. So, and that he said that they had both notions sometimes together. And what this made me think of is the ancient Greeks taking to heart is kind of an enactment, and it's a retrospective, glad at heart to keep it in memory, which is almost the definition of retrospective sense making, But elsewhere, he started talking about what would it be like if there was no thinking? If people didn't have these, laying out ways of thinking and pursuing those ways of thinking. And he started to list out a whole set of things that you wouldn't have, like automobiles and the Atomic Energy Commission, which maybe we want to lose that one. But, remember, this is before iPhones and laptops and all that he was writing in 1950. So he's saying, if we look at letting lie before us, this notion, it seems like the kind of enthinkment that you have as a possibility, because the more I'm looking at it, it describes it as if you go back to Parmenides, the pre-Socratic, or you go back to Plato, they were thinkers, and other people tried to figure out their kind of thinking ever since. So it actually affects Western ways of thinking. And he makes a point that, and I use the example of in the medical field of the Hippocratic and the Hippocratic Oath, that probably Hippocrates knew more about it than his followers did. Had a tighter grip on it and his thinking about ethics. And that's what I was kind of following on when I looked at Louis Ralph Pondy and my interaction with Pondy. Is Wyke makes a big notion that Pondy made this in jest or a joke or wasn't serious or whatever. But that doesn't matter, because Heidegger is saying there's a difference between stating something and pursuing a way of thinking about something. And if you look at the way, I wrote the book, and Duncan mentioned this too. It's, the book on Pondy, which is now at the publishers, by the way. I sent it off. It's like, I've had enough. I think got other things to do. So the notion was, if I'm trying to read and review everything Pondy wrote and the things we wrote together, a couple books and an article and my lecture notes with him, then I still can't get in touch with the way he was thinking in his own way of thinking, because probably he didn't even know that, so how am I going to know it? And the second thing is, I can pursue the problematic that I saw in Pondy's thinking, which I did in the book, I think, in my own way, and then lay that out. So I've started to lay out. Oh, and he says another thing we wouldn't have, and that Heidegger lists what we would have without this notion of thinking, or what's called thinking, is that we wouldn't have an age of enlightenment. And he lists, like, we wouldn't have dialectical materialism. We wouldn't have a doctrine of the Trinity, those of you in that faith, no atomic energy commission, and no automobile. And that's on page 204 of what's called thinking. And I thought that's an incredible, profound idea that, okay, enactment is cool, and the spontaneous enactment with the senses, but as Heidegger puts it on page 198, activating an organ of speech, such as a mouth and a tongue and the teeth and the larynx and the lungs and so forth, is all well and good, but it's not thinking. It's, speech, it's stating something, it's enacting, whatever. So I thought Heidegger is making a pretty good case for the Enthinkment circle, if you know what I mean. I hope. Or if you don't, then keep in mind I've lost my executive function. Yay, go. Tear it apart.
I have a question, David. One of the things that I am not quite understanding it, but I like, is that notion that you mentioned of taking to heart, because what I am working on right now, and we can talk about that a little bit if there's time. I'm working on working my way through the time.
Oh yeah.
The time book. So can you talk a little more about the taking to heart?
Yeah,
where is that? Taking to heart. How does that relate to past, present, future?
Sure. Well, it's on page 203 to 204 in particular on what's called Thinking Book. And And, you know, he spent the previous parts of the book all about, you know, the wasteland, and the wasteland's growing, and woe to you who doesn't, you know, take the wasteland into account, et cetera. And then he switches gears and he's all about this notion of, did the Greeks have a way of taking it to heart? I misspelled heart here once, but I'll fix it later. And then the taken to heart, and he's developing that. And I think it relates to indigenous ways of knowing that he sees in ancient Greece. He doesn't mention indigenous, but I think they have that same taking to heart of one's community, one's ecology, the notion of the telling and laying before the community. And he uses a couple of different metaphors to describe it, which may or may not be good, but one metaphor is you can see the branches, the leaves, and the trunk of a tree, but you don't see the roots. You don't see the roots of the tree, you know? And the other one slips my mind right now, but I'll recall it a little bit later. So I'm looking at, in particular, he's trying to tie this notion of letting lie before you something into the notion of being and the freedom of movement of a thinker to engage what lies there in its presence. So the temporalness is the presence, is one of the temporalness is certainly the presence of it, because it's letting lie before you. But then you can go before, well, how did it lie before? And you go historically, and then you go into, you know, the notion of the bets on the future, and the letting lie before us means that it lies in the future, coming near. So it's arriving in the future. So that I think he has all three kind of temporalities of the before and the present, and the what's coming. And I think he's also saying that some of these ways of thinking can be dead ends. He uses the term of a thinking that's a dead end and a thinking that's wrong, you know, and is it correct or incorrect? So he's using a lot of the same terms in the time book, being both the being in time and the other one that you're reading. So that, I think it's there, you know, if that answers your question.
It does. Jillian has her.
Opening lines of thinking. So it's lines of thinking. It's not just I'm thinking now and I thought of this. It's like, no, it's like you're part of, he uses the word habitat. You're part of the habitat and the locus. So that locus and that habitat, you are in that thinking. That's where Pondy and the, you know, ancient Greeks or whatever, you're looking at a great thinker, they're in a habitat and they're in a sort of sorting out. But hey,